Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to share with you a groundbreaking announcement that is shaking the foundations of our nation's approach to land ownership and economic justice. Ibrahim Traoré has dropped a bombshell, a bold, transformative vision for land reforms that echo the radical changes we have seen in South Africa. For decades, land has been a source of inequality, a symbol of division and historical injustice. Ibrahim Traoré's proposal challenges the status quo, calling for a sweeping redistribution of land to restore fairness and dignity to those long marginalized. Just like South Africa's bold steps to address the deep scars of apartheid-era dispossession, Traoré's reforms aim to correct historical wrongs and empower communities by giving land back to the people who work it, who nurture it, and who depend on it for their livelihoods. This is not just about land, it's about reclaiming hope, rebuilding trust, and revitalizing economies from the ground up. It's a call to confront entrenched interests and outdated systems that have allowed land inequality to persist. Traoré's vision is courageous, unapologetic, and urgently needed in a world where the wealth gap continues to widen. As South Africa's reform showed, successful land reform requires political will, transparency, and a commitment to justice. Ibrahim Traoré's announcement signals that we are ready to embark on this difficult but necessary journey. It challenges us to rethink land ownership not as a privilege for a few, but as a shared resource for all, ensuring that every citizen has a stake in the country's future. Let us listen closely, engage thoughtfully, and support this bold initiative that promises to reshape our society for the better. The time for incremental change has passed. What we need now is a transformative leap, one that Ibrahim Traoré is daring to take. Ibrahim Traoré has ignited a powerful conversation by proposing bold land redistribution that aims to fundamentally transform the way land ownership is structured in our society. His call for sweeping land reforms is not just another policy proposal. It is a direct response to decades, even centuries, of land inequality that have left many communities marginalized and excluded from economic opportunities. But by pushing for a fair redistribution of land, Traoré challenges the entrenched systems that have allowed a small minority to hold disproportionate control over this vital resource, while the majority remain landless or own only marginal plots. This approach is urgent and necessary to create a more just society where access to land is not a privilege but a right shared by all. Traoré's vision draws inspiration from the historic land reforms in South Africa, where post-apartheid policies sought to address the massive injustices of racial land dispossession. These reforms were a critical part of healing and rebuilding the nation. Similarly, Traoré understands that land is not just a piece of property, it is a symbol of power, identity, and economic survival. For too long, historical circumstances and unfair policies have locked many people out of land ownership, leaving them vulnerable to poverty and social exclusion. Through his bold redistribution plan, he aims to rectify these injustices by ensuring land is allocated more equitably, allowing those who have been historically disadvantaged to reclaim their rightful place in society. The second crucial point in Traoré's proposal is its emphasis on historical justice. Land ownership in many parts of the world, including our own, is deeply intertwined with colonialism, displacement, and exclusion. These injustices have created systemic inequalities that persist today, influencing economic disparities and social tensions. Traoré's reforms are designed to acknowledge these painful legacies and make amends. Just like South Africa's land reform process, which sought to reverse the legacy of apartheid by redistributing land to black South Africans who were forcibly removed or denied ownership, Traoré's plan seeks to create a more inclusive system where historical wrongs are actively addressed and reparations are made through equitable land access. Empowerment of communities lies at the heart of this vision. Land is more than just an asset. It is the foundation of people's livelihoods, cultures, and futures. By giving land back to those who cultivate it and depend on it for survival, the reforms empower individuals and communities to build sustainable economies, create jobs, and improve living conditions. This grassroots empowerment counters the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few and fosters a sense of ownership and responsibility among citizens. When people have secure land tenure, they are more likely to invest in their land, improve agricultural productivity, and contribute to local and national economic growth. Moreover, Traore's land reform plan is a strategic move toward economic revitalization. The unequal distribution of land has been a significant barrier to economic development, trapping many in cycles of poverty. By redistributing land fairly, the reforms unlock new economic potential by broadening access to agricultural opportunities and enabling more equitable participation in the economy. This revitalization is not just about agriculture, it is about creating a foundation for rural development, food security, and inclusive growth. The reforms seek to stimulate economic activity at the community level, which can ripple outwards to transform the broader economy. However, the success of these reforms depends heavily on political will and transparency. Redistributing land is a complex and often contentious process that requires strong leadership and a commitment to justice. Traore recognizes that entrenched interests have long resisted land reform efforts because they benefit from maintaining the status quo. Overcoming these barriers means implementing reforms transparently, with clear guidelines and accountability mechanisms to ensure fair treatment for all parties involved. It also requires the government and stakeholders to engage communities, build consensus, and address concerns to prevent conflict and ensure lasting change. Ultimately, Ibrahim Traoré's proposal is a call for transformative change. It challenges us to move beyond incremental or superficial reforms and embrace a bold, urgent vision for a fairer future. This is a decisive moment, one that demands courage, creativity, and collaboration to reshape our society so that land becomes a shared resource that supports the well-being of all citizens. Traore's land reforms, inspired by successful examples like South Africa, offer a pathway toward justice, empowerment, and economic renewal. It is now up to us to listen, engage, and act to make this vision a reality. Ibrahim Traoré's announcement of land reforms carries a powerful message that goes beyond simple policy change. It is a profound commitment to historical justice. The core of his reforms is the urgent need to address and correct the deep-rooted injustices related to land ownership that have persisted for generations. Like South Africa's post-apartheid efforts, which sought to dismantle the legacy of racial dispossession and restore land rights to those who were forcibly removed, Traore's vision focuses on healing historical wounds by redistributing land in a way that acknowledges and repairs past wrongs. For centuries, land ownership has been a source of inequality and exclusion in many societies. The ownership of land was often shaped by colonial conquests, discriminatory laws, and systemic dispossession that favored a privileged few while denying millions their rightful place. These historical injustices have left a lasting impact, fueling economic disparity, social tension, and intergenerational poverty. Traore's reforms directly confront this painful legacy, recognizing that meaningful change requires more than economic adjustments. It demands a reckoning with history and a commitment to restorative justice. South Africa's post-apartheid land reform serves as a significant example of how a nation can approach this complex issue. After decades of legalized racial segregation and land dispossession, the South African government launched policies to redistribute land to Black South Africans who had been forcibly removed or denied ownership under apartheid. This was not just an economic initiative, but a moral imperative aimed at correcting systemic injustice and promoting social cohesion. Similarly, Traore's reforms seek to apply these lessons by prioritizing fairness and inclusivity, ensuring that the redistribution process does not just redistribute land, but also rebuilds trust and dignity among communities long marginalized. The principle of historical justice embedded in Traoré's reforms also means acknowledging the emotional and cultural significance of land. Land is not merely a commodity, it is tied to identity, heritage, and community. Many groups have experienced displacement not only from their homes, but also from their cultural roots, which are intimately connected to the land they once occupied. By addressing historical land injustices, Traoré's plan honors these connections, helping to restore cultural integrity and a sense of belonging to those affected. This emotional and cultural healing is a crucial but often overlooked component of land reform. Furthermore, the focus on historical justice requires a transparent and inclusive approach to the redistribution process. Past injustices were often perpetuated by opaque systems that excluded the voices of those most affected. Traoré's reforms emphasized the need for open dialogue, community participation, and fairness in decision-making. By involving communities and ensuring that redistribution efforts are carried out with transparency and accountability, the reforms aim to prevent new conflicts and build a foundation for lasting peace and cooperation. Economic justice is also intertwined with historical justice in Traoré's vision. The legacy of land dispossession has directly contributed to wealth inequality and limited opportunities for economic advancement for marginalized groups. Restoring land rights is a crucial step toward leveling the economic playing field. By giving people secure land tenure, they can invest in their property, improve productivity, and generate income, which in turn benefits local economies and reduces poverty. Turban and Cantricane, La Pole, in this way, historical justice through land reform becomes a pathway to economic empowerment and sustainable development. However, achieving these reforms will require strong political will and sustained commitment. The process of correcting historical land injustices is complex and often contentious, as it challenges entrenched power structures and vested interests. Traoré's bold proposal calls for courageous leadership to navigate these challenges with integrity and fairness. The success depends on building broad consensus, safeguarding the rights of all parties, and ensuring that land redistribution is implemented in a way that promotes reconciliation and social cohesion. In conclusion, Ibrahim Traoré's land reform proposal is a visionary step toward historical justice. It recognizes that land ownership issues are deeply tied to past injustices and that addressing these injustices is essential for building a fair and inclusive society. By drawing lessons from South Africa's post-apartheid reforms, Traoré's plan aims to not only redistribute land but also restore dignity, cultural identity, and economic opportunity to those historically marginalized. This is more than a policy. It is a transformative effort to heal wounds, empower communities, and create a foundation for a just future. It calls on all of us to engage thoughtfully and support this critical journey toward reconciliation and equity. Ibrahim Traoré's land reform initiative carries a powerful and transformative message centered on the empowerment of communities. At the heart of his proposal is the belief that land should belong to those who work it, nurture it, and depend on it for their livelihoods. This principle is crucial for reversing the historical patterns of exclusion and marginalization that have left many communities landless and economically vulnerable. By returning land to the people who directly depend on it, Traoré's reforms aim to unlock the true potential of these communities, fostering empowerment, self-reliance, and sustainable development. For too long, land ownership has been concentrated in the hands of a few, often disconnected from the realities of everyday agricultural life and community needs. Many marginalized communities have been denied access to fertile land, limiting their ability to improve their living standards and contribute meaningfully to the economy. This disconnect between land ownership and land use has entrenched poverty and inequality. Traoré's reforms challenge this imbalance by prioritizing the people who actively engage with the land: small-scale farmers, pastoralists, and rural families, ensuring they gain secure tenure and the right to manage their resources. The empowerment of communities through land reform goes beyond simple ownership. It involves giving people control over their land in a way that allows them to make decisions, invest in their property, and plan for their future. Secure land tenure creates a foundation for economic stability and growth because it provides people with the confidence and incentive to improve their land and livelihoods. When communities have legal and recognized rights to their land, they are more likely to invest in better farming techniques, infrastructure, and sustainable practices that increase productivity and income. This not only benefits individual families, but also strengthens local economies and food security. Moreover, empowering communities through land ownership fosters social inclusion and political participation. Land is deeply tied to identity, culture, and community cohesion. When marginalized groups regain access to their ancestral lands or receive land through redistribution, it helps restore a sense of dignity and belonging that has often been lost due to historical displacement and exclusion. This empowerment translates into greater engagement in civic life, as communities that feel secure and respected are more likely to participate in decision-making processes and advocate for their rights. Traoré's reforms therefore contribute to building stronger, more resilient societies where diverse voices are heard and valued. The example of South Africa's land reforms offers valuable lessons in how community empowerment through land redistribution can lead to broader social transformation. After apartheid, land was returned to many black South Africans who had been forcibly removed or dispossessed. This process was not without challenges, but it fundamentally shifted the power dynamics by enabling previously marginalized groups to reclaim control over their livelihoods. Traoré's plan reflects a similar commitment to empowering communities by ensuring that land redistribution is not just symbolic, but practical and meaningful, providing people with the tools and support they need to thrive. Additionally, land reforms that empower communities help to address systemic poverty and inequality. Secure access to land can provide a stable source of income and food for families, reducing their vulnerability to economic shocks. It also opens opportunities for entrepreneurship and innovation in agriculture and related sectors. As people gain control over land, they can diversify their livelihoods, improve education and health outcomes, and invest in their children's futures. This creates a ripple effect that can lift entire communities out of poverty and contribute to national development. However, true community empowerment requires more than just land redistribution. It demands supportive policies, access to credit, training, and infrastructure to ensure that new landowners can make the most of their resources. Traoré's reforms acknowledge this by advocating for comprehensive support systems that help communities manage their land sustainably and profitably. This holistic approach is essential to transforming land reform from a mere transfer of property into a lasting catalyst for empowerment and growth. In conclusion, Ibrahim Traoré's land reform proposal places empowerment of communities at its center by returning land to those who work and depend on it. This approach recognizes that land is not just an economic asset, but a vital foundation for dignity, identity, and opportunity. By securing land rights for marginalized communities, the reforms aim to improve livelihoods, strengthen local economies, and foster social inclusion. Through this empowerment, Traoré's vision offers a pathway toward a fairer, more just society where everyone has the chance to build a better future rooted in the land they call home. Ibrahim Traoré's bold land reform proposal places great emphasis on economic revitalization, viewing land reform as a crucial step toward rebuilding and revitalizing the economy from the grassroots level. The unequal distribution of land has long been a major barrier to economic development in many societies, where vast tracts of fertile land remain concentrated in the hands of a few. While the majority of the population struggles with limited access to land resources, Traoré's reforms seek to change this dynamic by redistributing land in a way that enables broader participation in economic activities, particularly in agriculture, which remains a backbone for many developing economies. The revitalization of the economy begins at the grassroots, where the majority of people live and work. In rural areas, agriculture is often the primary source of income and sustenance. However, many small-scale farmers and rural communities have been excluded from owning sufficient land, which limits their capacity to produce food, generate income, and contribute to economic growth. By redistributing land to those who actively work it, Traore's reforms aim to unlock the potential of these grassroots producers. When more people have secure and equitable access to land, they are empowered to increase agricultural productivity, improve food security, and participate more fully in local and national markets. Economic revitalization through land reform is not just about handing over land. It is about creating the conditions for sustainable economic development. Secure land tenure encourages investment in land improvement, such as better irrigation, soil conservation, and the adoption of modern farming techniques. These investments lead to higher yields and more efficient production, which in turn stimulates economic activity in related sectors such as processing, transportation, and trade. The multiplier effect generated by revitalized agriculture can boost rural economies, reduce poverty, and create employment opportunities, which benefits the broader national economy. Traore's vision also highlights the importance of addressing structural inequalities that have historically marginalized certain groups from the economy. Land reform serves as a corrective measure that redistributes not only land but also economic power. By broadening land ownership, the reforms promote more inclusive growth, where wealth and opportunity are shared more fairly among different social groups. This inclusive approach helps to reduce economic disparities, which are often a source of social tension and instability, thereby fostering a more stable and prosperous society. Moreover, economic revitalization through land reform supports diversification and innovation. When smallholder farmers and rural communities gain control over their land, they are better positioned to diversify their sources of income beyond traditional subsistence farming. They can explore new crops, engage in agro-processing, develop ecotourism, or establish cooperatives that add value to their produce. This diversification increases resilience against economic shocks, climate change, and market fluctuations. Traore's reforms recognize that revitalizing the economy requires not just more land ownership, but also empowering communities to innovate and adapt in a rapidly changing world. The example of South Africa's land reforms provides valuable lessons for economic revitalization. Following apartheid, the South African government sought to redistribute land to black South Africans who had been dispossessed. Though the process faced significant challenges, it demonstrated how land reform could serve as a foundation for economic empowerment and rural development. Traore's approach draws on these lessons by focusing on practical outcomes, ensuring that land reform leads to real economic gains for beneficiaries rather than merely symbolic gestures. This requires accompanying measures such as access to credit, extension services, infrastructure development, and market integration to maximize the economic benefits of redistributed land. Economic revitalization also depends on political will and effective governance. Land reform is a complex process involving multiple stakeholders with sometimes conflicting interests. To ensure that economic benefits are realized, the reforms must be implemented transparently, fairly, and efficiently. Traore's plan calls for strong institutional frameworks and policies that protect the rights of new landowners, provide support services, and promote sustainable land use. These elements are essential for creating a stable environment where economic revitalization can thrive. In summary, Ibrahim Traoré's land reform agenda sees economic revitalization as a central goal, recognizing that land reform is fundamental to rebuilding the economy from the grassroots. By redistributing land to those who work it, the reforms aim to boost agricultural productivity, create jobs, and foster inclusive economic growth. This transformation will not only improve livelihoods, but also strengthen the broader economy by making it more equitable and resilient. Traore's vision offers a roadmap for harnessing the power of land reform to drive sustainable development and create a prosperous future for all citizens. Ibrahim Traoré's ambitious land reform proposal highlights a critical truth. Political will and transparency needed are essential for the success of any meaningful land redistribution effort. Land reform is inherently complex and often contentious because it challenges long-standing power structures and economic interests. Without strong political commitment, clear transparency, and a genuine effort to dismantle entrenched interests that have perpetuated land inequality, even the most well-designed reforms risk failure or producing unintended consequences. Traore's plan acknowledges these realities and calls for a bold and honest approach to overcoming the significant obstacles that stand in the way of equitable land ownership. At the heart of land reform is a redistribution of power as much as a redistribution of land. For centuries, land ownership has been concentrated among elites who have vested interests in maintaining the status quo. These entrenched groups often wield considerable political, economic, and social influence, which they use to resist changes that would diminish their control over land and resources. This resistance can manifest in many ways, from political lobbying and legal challenges to covert actions that undermine reform efforts. Therefore, without strong political will from leadership willing to confront these entrenched interests head-on, land reforms can become stalled, diluted, or co-opted, losing their transformative potential. Political commitment must come not only from the highest levels of government, but also be sustained across institutions and agencies responsible for implementing reforms. Land reform requires coordination between various government departments, including agriculture, justice, finance, and local governance. Each of these sectors plays a role in ensuring that land is redistributed fairly, that legal titles are properly granted, and that beneficiaries receive support services. Political leaders must ensure that these institutions work together efficiently and without corruption or favoritism. Without this cohesive political backing, land reform initiatives risk being undermined by bureaucratic inefficiencies, conflicting interests, or even outright sabotage. Transparency is equally vital to the success of land reform. Historically, many land redistribution efforts have suffered from opacity, lack of clear guidelines, and limited community involvement. This lack of transparency breeds mistrust and suspicion among stakeholders, often leading to disputes, resistance, and social unrest. Ibrahim Traoré's proposal emphasizes that transparent processes are essential not only to build public confidence, but also to ensure fairness and accountability. Clear criteria for land allocation, open communication with affected communities, and public monitoring of the reform process are necessary to prevent corruption and favoritism. Transparency creates a system where decisions can be scrutinized and challenged, helping to build legitimacy and acceptance. Dismantling entrenched interests requires more than just good intentions. It requires concrete strategies and legal frameworks to challenge and redistribute land held unjustly or excessively. Traoré's reforms call for a rigorous review of land ownership records, the identification of illegal or unfair holdings, and mechanisms to reclaim and redistribute such land. This process often involves confronting powerful individuals and entities, which can be politically risky and require unwavering leadership. Political will is needed to enforce laws, resolve disputes fairly, and protect the rights of vulnerable communities who have historically been excluded. The dismantling of entrenched land monopolies is a delicate process that must balance justice with stability, but it is indispensable for creating a fairer system. Furthermore, political will and transparency are necessary for sustaining land reform over the long term. Land reform is not a one-time event, but a continuous process that requires monitoring, adaptation, and support. Political leaders must commit to providing ongoing resources for land administration, legal support, agricultural extension services, and dispute resolution mechanisms. And transparency in how these resources are allocated and used reinforces public trust and ensures that reforms deliver lasting benefits. Without sustained political support and open governance, initial gains can be reversed or eroded over time. The experience of other countries, including South Africa, teaches us that land reform without strong political backing and transparency often leads to partial success or unintended consequences. Where governments have shown strong commitment, provided clear legal frameworks, and involved communities transparently, reforms have resulted in improved equity and social stability. Traore's vision embraces these lessons, advocating for reforms that are not only ambitious, but also grounded in realistic and pragmatic governance principles. In conclusion, Ibrahim Traore's land reform agenda highlights that political will and transparency needed are fundamental pillars for success. Strong political commitment is required to confront entrenched interests and drive the reforms forward, while transparency ensures fairness, accountability, and public trust. Together, these elements create the foundation upon which transformative land reforms can be built. Reforms that dismantle inequality, empower communities, and foster social and economic justice. Without them, even the most visionary land reform plans risk falling short of their goals. It is therefore imperative that political leaders, institutions, and civil society unite in support of transparent, committed, and courageous reform to realize a fairer future for all. Ibrahim Traore's land reform proposal stands as a call for transformative change, a powerful challenge to the nation to move beyond the slow, incremental reforms of the past and embrace bold, urgent action to create a fairer and more just future. In many countries, land reform has often been approached cautiously, with small steps taken over long periods, resulting in limited progress and persistent inequalities. Traore recognizes that the scale of the problem demands more than piecemeal adjustments. It requires a decisive, comprehensive overhaul of the land ownership system that addresses historical injustices, empowers marginalized communities, and revitalizes the economy in a meaningful way. This call for transformative change is rooted in the understanding that gradual reforms have repeatedly failed to dismantle entrenched inequalities. In many cases, land redistribution programs have been slow, inefficient, and heavily compromised by political and economic pressures. The result has been frustration, social unrest, and the continuation of systemic land imbalances that undermine social cohesion and economic development. Traore's plan rejects this incremental approach and instead pushes for urgent, large-scale reforms that can deliver tangible benefits quickly and restore hope to those who have been long excluded from land ownership. Transformative change means reimagining the relationship between people and land. It is about fundamentally shifting power dynamics by redistributing land in ways that are fair, transparent, and effective. Traore's plan is bold because it confronts powerful interests directly and insists on meaningful redistribution rather than symbolic gestures. This approach requires courage and political will, as it challenges deeply rooted structures that have historically benefited a small elite at the expense of the majority. Traore's vision is uncompromising in its demand that land reform be both just and practical, delivering real land, rights, and resources to those who need them most. Urgency is a key aspect of this call for transformative change. The problems caused by land inequality are not abstract or distant. They affect millions of people today, limiting economic opportunities, fueling poverty, and contributing to social instability. Waiting for slow reforms only prolongs suffering and deepens divisions. Traore stresses that the time for action is now. Bold reforms implemented swiftly and decisively can begin to heal wounds, restore dignity, and unlock economic potential. By moving with urgency, the nation can seize the moment to build a foundation for inclusive growth and social justice. The transformative nature of Traore's plan also lies in its comprehensive scope. It is not just about redistributing land, but about creating systems that support beneficiaries in managing their land productively and sustainably. This means integrating land reform with policies on agricultural support, credit access, infrastructure development, and legal protections. Transformative change requires a holistic approach that addresses the root causes of inequality and equips communities with the tools they need to thrive. Traore's plan calls for coordinated efforts across government agencies and active engagement with communities to ensure that land reform leads to lasting empowerment and development. Moreover, Traore's call resonates beyond the immediate issue of land ownership. It is a broader invitation to rethink how society addresses inequality and injustice in all forms. The land reform agenda becomes a symbol of a wider movement toward fairness, inclusion, and the restoration of rights. It challenges citizens, leaders, and institutions to embrace change at all levels, economic, social, and political, and to work together toward a shared vision of a more equitable future. And lessons from other countries, such as South Africa's post-apartheid land reforms, reinforce the importance of transformative change. South Africa's experience shows that successful land reform requires bold policies, strong leadership, and sustained commitment. While the process is challenging and complex, the potential rewards in terms of social justice, economic inclusion, and national reconciliation are profound. Traore's plan draws on these lessons, urging his nation to learn from the past and chart a new course that prioritizes decisive action and inclusive growth. In conclusion, Ibrahim Traoré's land reform initiative is more than a policy proposal. It is a call for transformative change that demands boldness, urgency, and a willingness to break with the slow and ineffective reforms of the past. His vision challenges the nation to confront entrenched inequalities head-on, redistribute land fairly, and empower communities to build sustainable futures. This is a historic moment that calls for courage and collective resolve to create a fairer society where land serves as a foundation for justice, opportunity, and shared prosperity. The time to act is now, and Traore's plan lights the way forward toward that vital transformation.